Security camera footage captured the moment Cassius Turvey, a boy just 15 years old, was walking home from school when he was suddenly set upon by a group of men. After the attack, they sped away in a car and tried to dispose of the weapon. The question that shook the nation remains: how could a schoolboy be killed so brutally and so senselessly on his way home from school? In today's video, we will revisit the case that shocked Australia, examining how an act of vigilante violence spiralled into an irreversible tragedy. If you believe this story needs to be heard, please subscribe to the channel, share your thoughts in the comments, and above all, take a moment to offer a prayer for Cassius to rest in peace. In the next part, we will look closely at the investigation, where every piece of evidence gradually brought the truth to light. That afternoon, the Perth sky was clear, the mild October air casting a calm across the streets of Middle Swan. The neighbourhood seemed quiet, broken only by the occasional car passing Midland Station, a handful of small shops still trading, and the near-empty streets slipping into the golden light of late day. In that seemingly ordinary setting, a 15-year-old boy was on his way home from school. Cassius Turvey, a young student from the Noongar Yamachi community, walked slowly alongside his friends. He was a child cherished by family and teachers alike, bright and mature beyond his years. The stillness of the afternoon gave no sign of what was to come. Cassius was simply a schoolboy heading home, as he did on any other day. Yet hidden within the shadows of the suburb, eyes were watching. Jack Stephen James Brearley, 24, together with Brodie Lee Palmer and Mitchell Colin Forth, had appeared. With them was Alicia Louise Gilmore, the young woman behind the wheel of the car carrying the group. None of them were strangers to trouble, and their presence that day brought a heaviness that disrupted the suburb's calm. Cassius could not have known that the familiar road home was about to become the place of his fate. He kept walking, talking with his friends, unaware that behind him a plan of violence was taking shape. The surroundings looked unchanged, but the atmosphere had shifted, signalling the onset of a dark chain of events about to unfold. From that moment, everything began to move in a direction that could not be reversed, the opening to a tense sequence before the tragedy itself descended. That afternoon, Cassius Turvey left school with a few friends. The road leading home was familiar, lined with low houses and trees standing still in the gentle breeze. The teenagers walked along, chatting casually, unaware that eyes were watching them from a distance. Elsewhere, 4 adults had gathered inside a car driven by Alicia Louise Gilmore. A rumour about a broken window in the neighbourhood had spread quickly, and in their eyes, the innocent group of students became suspects. The suspicion was groundless, yet it was enough to stir violent intent. Rather than contacting police or seeking confirmation, they chose the path of vigilante action. Jack Stephen James Brearley, known for his aggression, fixed in his mind that Cassius and his friends must pay. Beside him, Brodie Lee Palmer and Mitchell Colin Forth sat in silent agreement, allowing impulse to dictate. At the wheel, Alicia kept her eyes on the road, steering the car towards the suburban streets where the students were making their way home. Inside the vehicle, the atmosphere was tense. Words were few, glances were exchanged, and all thoughts converged on a single target. No one suggested stopping. No one considered another course. The decision had been made, consuming all reason. Cassius kept walking, unaware of the danger closing in. Within minutes, the quiet of the afternoon would be shattered. An uneven confrontation was about to unfold, marking the beginning of the most brutal chapter in this tragedy. The car driven by Alicia Louise Gilmore rolled slowly through the suburban streets, the late afternoon sun glinting across the bitumen. Inside, 3 men sat tense, their eyes fixed on the view beyond the windows, waiting for the moment of confrontation. Gilmore said nothing, but her hands gripped the steering wheel tightly. As the vehicle approached the spot where Cassius and his friends were walking, it slowed, then came to a complete halt by the curb. Without a word, the doors swung open. Jack Stephen James Brearley stepped out first. In his hand, he carried a length of metal pole torn from a shopping trolley. Under the fading light, the weapon caught a cold gleam. Brodie Lee Palmer followed close behind, while Mitchell Colin Forth kept his distance. Their sudden presence shattered the quiet of the street. Cassius and his companions froze, caught off guard, struggling to comprehend what was unfolding. Brearley advanced quickly, his footsteps heavy, the sound of metal faintly ringing in his grip. He showed no hesitation, no pause. In an instant, the gap between attacker and the 15-year-old boy closed. The first swing came down hard, aimed directly at Cassius's head. The thud was brutal, leaving a chilling mark. The blows did not stop there. Brearley struck again and again, each movement forceful and relentless, leaving Cassius no chance to retreat. Palmer stood close, ready to move if required, while Forth looked on, neither intervening nor walking away. It unfolded swiftly, savagely, beyond control. Cassius staggered, then collapsed onto the ground. His small frame lay helpless before the violence. His friends, terrified, screamed and fled in panic. On the deserted street remained only the motionless figure of a boy and those who had delivered the assault. The act ended in a brief silence. Brearley breathed heavily, clutching the pole tighter before stepping back. Palmer scanned the surroundings while Gilmore kept the engine running, waiting for them to return. No one made any move to assist Cassius. The car pulled away quickly, leaving behind a scene of devastation. In only a few short minutes, an ordinary afternoon had been turned into tragedy. Cassius lay stricken, his consciousness fading, as the moment spiraled into an emergency that would soon draw police and the wider community into its wake. The screams echoed along the deserted street, prompting doors in the neighbourhood to swing open. Residents were startled to see a teenager collapse in the middle of the road, blood spreading slowly across the bitumen. Cassius's friends, panicked and shaken, reached for their phones and dialed 000. The call rang out urgently, reporting a serious assault that had just occurred. In those chaotic moments, no one knew what might happen next, but they understood one thing clearly: the intervention of the authorities could not be delayed. The sound of sirens echoed across the suburbs, cutting through each street and drawing the attention of the entire neighbourhood. Only minutes after the emergency call, police patrol cars and an ambulance arrived, their blue and red lights flashing against the walls of houses and across the footpaths. A street that had moments earlier been quiet was now gripped by chaos and tension. Officers quickly cordoned off the area, establishing a safety perimeter around where Cassius lay unconscious. On the ground, dark stains of blood stretched across the surface, creating a chilling and motionless scene. Witnesses had gathered nearby, shaken and trembling, their eyes fixed on the still figure of the young boy. Paramedics rushed forward, opening their medical kits and kneeling beside Cassius. They checked his breathing, felt for a pulse, and began urgent first aid. Every movement carried a sense of urgency. A medic called out to ready the stretcher. Cassius was carefully lifted, wrapped in a rescue blanket, and transferred into the ambulance. The engine roared to life, and the vehicle sped directly towards the nearest hospital. On the street, the atmosphere remained suffocating. Police officers continued to sweep the area, documenting every trace left behind. The metallic scent of blood lingered in the air, mingling with the hushed voices of fearful residents. The entire scene made it clear that this was not a simple assault, but a tragedy that had shaken the community. As Cassius was taken from the scene in a critical condition, police began preparing for the next crucial step: preserving evidence and commencing the forensic examination. Once the area was cordoned off, the crime scene unit began their work. Yellow tape was stretched across, keeping the crowd at a distance from the investigation site. On the roadway, the dark stains of blood remained visible, spread out in broken patches. Forensic officers crouched down to take photographs, marking each trace for the record. Along the street, faint shoe impressions left by those fleeing the scene were carefully documented and compared. Security cameras from several nearby homes were collected later that evening. The storage devices were sealed and sent to the Forensic Technology Unit for image extraction. Every piece of evidence, from blood and shoe prints to footage, was processed under strict procedures to ensure accuracy and prevent any detail from being overlooked. At the hospital, Cassius's condition was critical. The injuries to his head showed he had sustained multiple heavy blows from a blunt object. Forensic examination later confirmed the direct cause of death was severe head trauma, which had left him in a deep coma. After 10 days in intensive care, Cassius died on 23 October 2022. The loss of the teenager not only ended a young life, but also turned what began as a street assault into a homicide investigation. From that point, police raised the case to the highest level, determined to identify those responsible. As soon as Cassius was rushed to hospital, police devoted their full resources to the investigation. They began by reviewing security camera footage in the area, starting at Midland Station and then extending to nearby streets. Each frame was examined closely, every minor movement magnified and compared. Within days, investigators uncovered crucial recordings. The suspects were captured clearly on film, weapons in hand, moving hurriedly with evident tension. Beyond the public cameras, police also seized surveillance devices from the home of Alicia Louise Gilmore. Stored data revealed images of the group gathering, speaking among themselves and carrying metal bars both before and after the assault. Of particular significance was an audio recording inadvertently captured, which became key evidence. A voice was heard coldly admitting the act. "I bashed the cunt. I'm not going to jail." The statement not only confirmed direct involvement, but also demonstrated an awareness of the gravity of the conduct. At the same time, witnesses from the area were interviewed. They described seeing a car arrive suddenly, the group stepping out aggressively, then leaving swiftly after the boy collapsed on the ground. These accounts, aligned with the camera evidence, formed a consistent sequence that confirmed the criminal trail. The investigation unfolded over several weeks, but each lead gradually pieced together a complete picture. Every fragment of evidence pushed the inquiry closer to the truth. Once the picture was clear, authorities moved decisively to identify the individuals involved and carry out the arrests. After days of following the evidence, police had clearly identified those responsible. The first name to be targeted was Jack Stephen James Brearley. In a coordinated operation, he was taken into custody at his residence. The arrest was swift, leaving no chance for resistance. Brearley was led away quietly, his eyes averted, saying nothing. The investigation widened immediately after. Brodie Lee Palmer was the second to be apprehended. He was intercepted while travelling on the road, forced to stop his vehicle and raise his hands in surrender. Mitchell Colin Forth was also brought in, taken without incident, aware that the evidence against him was overwhelming. The last to be detained was Alicia Louise Gilmore, the woman who had driven the car on the day of the attack. She was arrested while at home with her family, offering no resistance, but visibly unsettled. During the arrests, police uncovered signs that the suspects had attempted to dispose of evidence. Some of the weapons had been discarded in remote areas, yet enough traces were recovered in time. Their efforts to erase the trail were not sufficient to conceal their actions. One by one, the group was taken into custody, and the criminal case file steadily took shape. With all four secured at the station, the case moved into a new phase. The next task for investigators was to obtain statements, gradually clarifying the role of each individual in the tragedy that had unfolded. In the interview room, Each suspect was brought in to give their statements separately. Jack Stephen James Brearley was the first to face a barrage of questions from investigators. He sat with his head lowered, his voice hoarse, insisting that he was not the one who struck the fatal blows. According to him, all responsibility lay with Brodie Lee Palmer. This denial stood in stark contrast to the footage that had already been recovered, yet Brearley clung stubbornly to his version of events. When Palmer was brought in, his account was no less evasive. He steadfastly maintained that he was merely present at the scene and had not personally struck Cassius. He attempted to distance himself from the decisive blow, even though his close presence had been clearly captured on camera. Mitchell Colin Forth appeared more cautious when confronted by police. He admitted to being with the group, but claimed his role was minimal, almost peripheral. Forth sought to present himself as a bystander, someone who had witnessed events but had not taken part in the violence. Finally, Alicia Louise Gilmore offered her explanation for driving the car. She said she had simply given the group a lift, with no knowledge that they intended to attack a schoolboy. Gilmore described herself as being caught up in the incident without anticipating the consequences. The statements were contradictory, each pointing in a different direction, seemingly designed to create ambiguity. Yet none of them could erase the evidence already gathered. From this point, the case file was further strengthened, setting the stage for the next, more decisive phase of the trial process. Police seized the metal pole, bearing traces of blood and DNA matching Cassius, along with stains found on the roadway. Witnesses, including Cassius's friends and local residents, confirmed the presence of the group of suspects. Footage from cameras at Midland Station and around Gilmore's residence clearly captured their movements before and after the assault. When combined with the forensic findings, the evidence reconstructed the sequence of events in full, forming a case strong enough to proceed to the prosecution stage in court. On 27 June 2025, the Supreme Court of Western Australia entered its final sitting in a case that had stretched for nearly 3 years. The atmosphere inside the courtroom was heavy, every gaze fixed on the dock where the accused sat. From the bench, the judge delivered the sentences in a calm yet uncompromising voice, each word falling like a hammer's strike. Jack Stephen James Brearley, the man who struck the fatal blows, was sentenced to life imprisonment with a non-parole period of 22 years. His penalty was regarded as the harshest, reflecting the brutality of his actions. Brodie Lee Palmer, who stood alongside him at the scene, also received life imprisonment, with a non-parole period of 18 years. Mitchell Colin Forth, who was found to have been present but not directly responsible for the attack, was sentenced to 12 years imprisonment, with a minimum of 10 years to be served. Finally, Alicia Louise Gilmore, who drove the group to the location, was handed a 15-month suspended sentence under strict supervision. In the courtroom, Cassius's family listened in silence. As the sentences were read, tears streamed down many faces. The boy's mother described the offenders in the dock as monsters, bringing with them a pain that could never be undone. Yet she also affirmed that these judgments represented justice served and society's recognition that her son's life was worthy of full protection. That moment in court did more than seal the legal fate of the 4 offenders. It closed a dark chapter for the community and shifted public attention towards a broader reckoning, confronting the social impact of the crime and asking deeper questions about trust, justice, and the safety of young people. Immediately after the verdict was handed down, the streets of Perth filled with people marching in memory of Cassius Turvey. They carried candles, flowers, and photographs of the teenager, walking in silence and creating an atmosphere that was both solemn and deeply mournful. The case did not end with a tragic death alone. It quickly became a symbol of the violence faced by Aboriginal youth. Many community leaders described it as a wake-up call, highlighting the vulnerability of young people in the face of prejudice and dangers within society. The Western Australian government also spoke out, calling for unity and pledging strong action to combat discrimination and to rebuild trust between the community and law enforcement. From that point, the case opened up a broader public dialogue about justice, safety, and the collective responsibility to protect the next generation. The case of Cassius Turvey has left a harsh lesson for the community. It shows that vigilante violence, born out of unfounded suspicion, can lead to devastating consequences. A reckless decision cost the life of an innocent teenager and pushed several adults into the grip of the law. In a society governed by the rule of law, trust in the police and the justice system must come first. Only by respecting the law and by working together to protect young people can we prevent tragedies like this from happening again. The tragedy of Cassius Turvey has concluded with severe sentences, yet its echoes continue to reverberate throughout society. A 15-year-old boy was robbed of the chance to live out his youth, all because of the rashness and misguided choices of adults. This story does not end with the grief of a single family. It stands as a shared wound across the community. It raises a pressing question about how we confront violence and prejudice. Have we done enough to safeguard our children, to prevent acts of vigilante justice that can so easily claim innocent lives? Justice may have been served, but the loss will never be repaired. And now, as we reflect on the entire case, the audience must also look inward. What do you think? How can we ensure that tragedies like this never happen again in Australia?